So throughout today, you're going to hear what I like to call Wesleyan wisdom. You can actually search that on LinkedIn. One of the ones that I'm going to use to introduce this next session is initiatives go to die in middle management. What does that mean? That means as these sales leaders, these VP of sales, we're like, oh, we have all these amazing ideas. Now we want our SDR managers to implement, but it doesn't work. So Hilmon has this amazing software, as I mentioned to you. He is the co-founder of CoachCRM. And he's going to tell you all about how it helps, what it does, and why you should use it. The thing that I love about Hilmon is every time I meet him, he has a brand new book. And if you've ever written a book, you know how long it takes to brain dump and get it all out. So now I will hand it over to you.
Thanks, Wesleyan. Oh, wow, theme music, too. You didn't tell me I got theme music. How about a big hand for the Tenbound folks for getting us out of our Zoom boxes and into a live event? Thank you very much. Wesleyan, MC, I was going to say hostess with the mostest, MC with the something that rhymes with MC. Glad to see all of you here. How's it going so far? Oh, come on, some coffee? How's it going so far? All right, we'll get there, we'll get there. You already got the keys out of the gate from David on all of the keys to success in the first 15 minutes, so that's a tough act to follow. I'm going to ask you, I don't have a whole bunch of slides. I'm going to ask you to use your imagination. I figure that it's early on in the day and this might be a fair ask. Is that going to be okay? Ask you to imagine some things? All right, thank you very much. Appreciate the feedback. All right, here's what I'd like you to imagine. Imagine you're 23 years old. You're in your very first role as a sales development manager. You've gotten this role because somehow, through the grace of God, you've strung together 3/4 of being the top performer in your organization. And what do you do with your top performer? You say, hey, let's make you a manager, right? So you get this role as a manager, and you've got 12 people on your team. You're in a web security organization. You've got a lot of folks who are based in Israel, some folks based in the UK, some folks based in California, and you're managing a team of 12. You've got 2 awesome performers. They are consistent. They're doing the activity. They're carrying the weight of the team. You got 8 who kind of show up here and there. They're doing okay. Some days are good, some days are bad, not really consistent. You got 2 who are going to be in customer success pretty soon. That's not disparaging customer success. This is a fact. This is just what happened, okay? All right, so what are you going to do with this team? You've got a manager in leadership who comes to you frequently saying, are we going to hit our number? What are you doing to get to the number? How many meetings are you going to set on the calendar? And you're doing all the things. You're inside a Slack, right? You're inside the CRM. You're monitoring data. You're ensuring that people are sourcing. You're on top of activity. You're monitoring conversion. You're figuring out hold rate. You're doing everything you can. And yet, even still, when you're asked, are you going to hit your number? You swallow. You say, yeah, but you're not sure. Because as many plates as you're spinning, you just can't figure out what it is that's actually moving the needle on the number because it seems to change. I know this sounds foreign for everybody in the room, but imagination is what we're doing here, right? It seems to change month over month, rep over rep. Finally, you get to an end of a quarter, and through the grace of God again, these 2 all-stars have pulled it out for the entire team and have saved your behind. Thank goodness, right? And what do we do in sales? We wipe the slate clean, and we start all over again on the treadmill. Now imagine something else. The day after hitting your number, those 2 performers independently come to you and tell you they're leaving the organization. One tells you they're leaving because she feels as though she's not growing. She feels as though she's not expanding. She feels as though she doesn't have further opportunities in the organization, and she's going to another place where she's got stronger management, stronger leadership, more clarification around role, and more clear path to progression. The second person comes in that afternoon and says that he's leaving because he didn't feel like he was getting any coaching and development. So now you're left with a team. You can probably imagine what happens the final quarter. I call it the final quarter. I guess I gave that away, didn't I? The next quarter comes, miss your number, you're pulled into a conversation with leadership where they say, we're going to have to let you go because you're not a person who's good at developing salespeople. This was my story. This was my story in my first sales development role. And it was a little unfair because, like everybody else who gets their first management role, I had a good 6.5 years of training. I had people teaching me how to do, psychology and how to move people's behavior. I had full support of management, giving me clear guidelines and coaching. I'm kidding, right? We all got all this training from management? Okay, all right. So I was just making sure you're with me here, right? So it felt really unfair. And I'm one of those people who doesn't let things go easily. So once I left the organization, I decided that I was never going to let this happen to me again. And I also didn't want to see anybody else in that role have this happen to them. So I went and I joined a training organization, one of the largest training organizations in the world, so that I could figure out what is the secret sauce. David talked about the secret sauce for sales development and management. I wanted to figure out what is the secret sauce for growing people. What actually makes a difference? Because no matter how hard I was trying and how immersed in the numbers I wasn't able to really feel as though I was doing the things that would make a difference. And clearly, the feedback I was getting from my team was that it wasn't happening. So when working with this organization, I did this for about 8 to 10 years and got to a point where I felt I had learned all that I could. And I was one of those kids who, when you got a remote control gift for Christmas, I would take it apart within about an hour because I had to know how it worked. So I kept trying to figure these things out over about 8.5 years of working with over 1,000 companies. Later on, I met my twin, who's Corey Bray, who's sitting right in front. Wave your hand, Corey. You can see why I call him my twin. He's a good foot taller than I am and looks a little different. At any rate, I met my twin. We actually were working together. He was my client. He came to me and needed a sales coach when he was working as a head of sales for a technology organization, a legal tech firm. And what we found was that we both had this nerding out affinity. This is why we've written 8 books. We had this nerding out affinity for trying to distill and uncover what are the mechanics. What are the things that you can teach to somebody that are replicatable? What are the things that consistently work? What are the things that you don't have to hypothesize? The things that you can count on with rigor and apply consistently to move the needle on these things that we're responsible for as management, because in middle management, it's tough. It's a black box of success. No one knows what we're doing that makes us successful. Everyone knows what we're not doing that we get held accountable for, right? So we decided to build a company based upon 2 things. How do we impact individual and how do we impact team performance in that order? And we've worked with about 1,000 companies at this point. That company is called ClozeLoop, not the one I'm wearing on my shoulder right now. It's our other baby. ClozeLoop's worked with about 1,000 companies right now, thousands of managers and thousands of salespeople. And our whole purpose in doing so is to move teams and to do it in a scalable way where we're imbuing the team's management, the individuals who create these teams, we're imbuing them with the techniques and tactics that they need to be consistently successful at delivering the revenue goals for the organization. And what we've found is really interesting. There are 3 seismic shifts. This conference is called Evolve, right? 3 seismic shifts that have taken place. Number 1, what we've observed in the companies that we've worked with is that it is the best of times and the worst of times at the same time. Here's why. There's more data and technology than ever before. Fantastic. We've got a dashboard for everything. We've got tech for everything, right? That's the good side. Here's the downside. We've got a dashboard for everything. We've got tech for everything. And what do? You get mired in the metrics. Some of these are vanity metrics. Some of them are important. How do we know which is which? And what is management doing above us? The leadership above us is holding us accountable to all of it because it exists, so it must be relevant, right? Best of times, worst of times. Again, best of times, worst of times. We've got a hybrid workforce. We've got remote teams. We're able to hire people anywhere and get salary arbitrage and create cultural diversity inside of our organization and have mapping all over the world. And it's the worst of times because we got people everywhere. And they're sitting in little boxes on Zoom. And we don't know what the heck they're doing all day long, right? And we had to manage folks and hold them accountable to specific metrics that are going to move the needle, because it doesn't matter where they are. It doesn't matter that we can't walk through a room like this, tap somebody on the shoulder, have a look, give some advice. We're still accountable to increasing performance. Best of times, worst of times, right? It's the best of times and it's the worst of times because we've got automation. How awesome is this? We no longer have to send individual emails. We no longer have to actually dial a phone. Some of us remember when we had to do that, still have dial finger from that, calluses on that thumb, right? No, we can hit a button and we can blast things out to everybody. And it's the worst of times because our worst rep can hit a button and blast things out to everybody, right? You see where I'm going with this. So there's a lot that we're accountable for. The second seismic shift is that we're in this gerbil wheel. And this gerbil wheel begins with bringing people into our organization and providing them some level of onboarding or training, right? Then we provide them some level of tech. And then we kind of wait around and we see what's going to happen. And we may train again, but ultimately we end up with some level of turnover. And that turnover could be turnover because they performed poorly. It could be turnover because they leave for another job, because every SDR is ready for management after 3 months. It could be any of these things, right, that are dangers to us as an organization. And then the final thing that we uncovered in working with all of these companies and trying to imbue individual and personal performance with the greatest strategy we possibly could is that there is a knowing and doing gap. And this isn't all on us. There's some really smart folks at Harvard who've written a book that's called The Knowing-Doing Gap. You don't have to read the book. I'll tell you what the summary is. It's basically this, that we know enough. We don't do enough. And there's a reason why. Most of our reps know what to do. It doesn't mean that we're doing it. There's an old joke somebody said that if we all did what we know to do, we'd all be skinny, rich, and happy. Right? This is just part of the human condition. But our challenge is, how do we get the folks who we've given enough information, who are constantly sitting on LinkedIn looking for more information, more techniques, more tactics, more strategies, more things to do differently? What's the next greatest subject line? What's the greatest way to close a call? The greatest way to open a call? How do you get meetings hold? They're doing all this. There's enough information. How do we get people executing on the stuff that they need to do? These are the 3 things that we've identified have been the biggest challenge to managing the SDR function and even managing further up the chain for folks who are actually closers. So how do you solve for this? What we've found is that coaching, as I'm sure you can guess because I'm wearing it here and it's twice somewhere on this slide and it's sitting out there at our booth and we wrote a book on it that's in your bag that's called The 5 Secrets of a Sales Coach. Coaching is the piece that moves the needle. And I know you know that already, right? Again, knowing, doing. So the challenge was not that people didn't understand that coaching was important. The challenge was that people didn't know how to go about doing it. Because again, no one gets to management and suddenly gets sent off for a PhD in coaching performance. So the reason we wrote the book was we had gleaned the information from the folks that we worked with to clearly understand what's going to move the needle for them. And it's 5 things. First, it's identifying the challenge. It's identifying the challenge that's going to have the greatest reward. It's not poking holes in every call recording and saying you started it wrong and your tone was weird here and you shouldn't have used that question. You shouldn't have gone silent here. Instead, you should have done active listening. It's not that. It's identifying what is the fulcrum, what's the biggest lever that with this specific individual I can make them aware of that's going to move the needle on their success ongoing. That's identifying the challenge. There's an O, which is outlining the path to success. In management, we have to understand where we're going. What does success look like for our rep? And be able to articulate that and then reverse engineer, if this is the gap and this is where you want to go, well, how do we get there? And what is the directional indication that shows that we're actually on that path, right? Outlining the path to success. We need to identify the action plan that's going to get us there. What are the steps that we're going to take? We need to be able to understand what the consequences are of not taking those steps. And then we need to be able to hold one another accountable. Rep has to be accountable. We have to be accountable. If you followed me there, that spells out COACH. That's coaching. Consequence, outline, action. Challenge, outline, action, consequence, hold accountable. It's just that simple. Now, the conference is called Evolve for a reason, right? What we believe The reason that we took this construct, we took this framework, and we took this work that we understood from having worked with thousands of managers, and we were compelled by the folks that we worked with to not just deliver this as a methodology, not just deliver this as a framework, but to come up with a means by which a manager can have a manager's platform. The CRM is not a manager's platform. The CRM is a platform for leadership, to track metrics, to understand conversion rates, to at a very high level be able to understand the directional implications of the organization, and it's fed by individual contributors, right? Call recording software is not a manager's tool. It's great. It's great for overview, don't get me wrong. But managers, any of you who have it, who find yourselves on Saturday or Sunday sitting there listening to calls, realize this is not your tool. This is a tool for your individual contributors. They're the ones who should be listening to their calls and pushing that information to you and saying, did I do it here at minute 3.5, right? The burden should not be on us in management in that respect. The automation tools, those are for ICs. Where is the platform that allows you in management to scale your impact, to scale your expertise, to scale the way in which you're working with your team so that you can sit back and have directional data, have visibility, and have the availability to push that visibility up to leadership so folks understand how you're impacting the organization. That's why we built CoachCRM. CoachCRM is comprised of 3 major components. The first component ties directly to that idea of action. This is the place where you're looking at your clipboard and understanding what's happening with my team, what is each individual working on, why did we identify that as their path to success, and how are they trending toward it. The second piece is a playbook. How often do we as managers know and understand that we have counterparts in the organization who may have a deeper level of expertise, they may have resolved an issue similar to the one that we're working on with someone that they're working with, or maybe there's someone even in an enablement role who has some expertise that they can impart to us that gives us a play for how we can go about resolving these issues so that the onus is not all on us. How do we create tribal knowledge internally with respect to managing performance in the same way that we have playbooks for how we engage with our customers and with our prospects? That's the playbook. And then finally, since none of us were given that opportunity to go get the PhD in behavioral psychology and communication, there's a place called the university. This is where an organization can house its own learning for managers so that they can go and get point solution indications on how you solve for a specific issue, because that's what we're looking for. We're not just looking for academic and theoretical understanding. We want to know, when this is happening, how does the organization recommend I best solve for this, right? You can drop in best practices that are gleaned from trainers that you work with, coaches that you work with, put this in video evidence and micro-learning inside of the system so that as you're coaching your team and as you're coaching performance, you've got every resource that you need to be able to move someone from where they are today to where they need to be successful. This is the evolution. This is how we're evolving from walking around with this burden on our back and walking around with blinders and not being able to really clearly attribute the activity that we're doing to the success of our team and our organization. And this is how we go about creating significant performance improvement for both individuals as well as teams. And that rising tide floats all boats. So I'd love to show this to you. Our booth is right outside. We'd love to chat about that. There's a book in your bags. If you haven't gotten it, stop by the booth. We'll provide it for you. It's called The 5 Secrets of a Sales Coach. It's written in fable format, so it's a nonfiction book, the first one that Corey and I attempted. You could read it on your flight home. You could read it on your drive home if you're not the person driving. It's meant to be short so that you can understand the framework very easily and go apply it as a methodology. There's another book that if you are challenged with anybody who's struggling with cold calls, we've written a book on why cold calls fail. You can get that as well. I think it was Wesleyan said that we've written a ton of books. They're about 8. If you're interested in any of them, come see us. Let's have a chat. Meanwhile, great speakers coming up, great panels coming up. We're really happy to be here and to be hosted by Tenbound. Really happy that all of you came out. I look forward to speaking to each and every one of you and wish you continued success. Thanks.
So we have a few moments for questions. Does anyone have a question that they would love to ask?
stage. Any questions?
Well, I'll tee one up.
Yeah.
So we talked about investing in SDRs through coaching. What is the one way that someone can get that underperforming SDR coached up? Just one. Give us one.
Give me what the underperformance is.
They're not hitting their targets.
That's pretty broad.
It is.
So I think that the best thing to do in a situation like that is to clearly understand, of all the things that an SDR could be doing, what is the thing that is most immediate that you could leverage to get that person to where they need to be. In other words, are they underperforming because of a mindset issue? Right? Think of the term mastery, and think of the first three letters. Mindset, activity, and skill set is what I want you to think of. MAS, right? So if you're evaluating an underperforming rep, let's figure out what is the underperformance derived of. Is it because their mindset is that the things that they're doing are not the types of things that are going to correlate to success, or maybe they're not the types of things they see themselves doing? Ever managed a rep who just, I don't really feel like cold calling is my thing, and like, who's really making cold calls these days when everybody's got a cell phone and everybody's kind of sitting at home and like, you're never going to really close a deal on a cold call anyway, so I'm just going to send emails all day long. Mindset issue, right? Maybe it's not a mindset issue. Maybe it's an activity issue. The person's got time management issues and they're just not getting to the things that they need to be doing. Maybe it's neither of those, and maybe it's a skill set issue, where it's that, hey, I believe I should be making cold calls, and I got them blocked off on my calendar every day, and every time I pick up the phone, I sound terrible because I haven't been trained. Each of those can be approached from very different ways, and we have to understand as managers how you approach a mindset issue differently than how you approach an activity issue, differently than how you approach a skill set issue. That's a high-level answer to your question.
Perfect. And one more question that I have for you is, what about the manager who says, I don't have time for coaching, and it doesn't work?
Those are two different sayings. Which saying is it?
Let's go with, I don't have time.
Okay, let's say you're in leadership. I just taught you a framework. I just taught you an MAS framework. What do you do with the person who said they didn't have time? Is that a mindset, activity, or a skill set issue? Throw it out there. I hear mindset. Why is it mindset? So I obviously don't think that it's critical. So how would you go about coaching this individual who believes that coaching is not critical? What would they need to understand if their mindset is that it just doesn't matter? They need to understand its implications and its impact, right? So how do you go about introducing a manager to the impact of coaching? That depends on your organization. Maybe you do it one-on-one. That's a great opportunity. When you're managing managers, lead by example. I'm having conversations with you, and we've helped to move the needle on this thing over the course of the last 3 months through conversation. Do you think that you could do the same with your team? Oh, wow, light bulb goes off because coaching doesn't mean something that I thought it meant, right? So the same framework applies.
Thank you so much.
Very welcome. Thanks, everyone.